The Untold Truth of Animal Care by Bella Ingaroni, Tyler Grantland, and Chris Mills. Whether you realize it or not, there are many animals in this world that are mistreated. All across the world, there are organizations, small and large, that have a mission of helping these mistreated animals. You may have heard of these major organizations like PETA or ASPCA, but what you may not know is that one of these may have an untold truth. Yes, we're referring to PETA here, one of the biggest animal organizations that you are constantly being exposed to through their depressing advertisements, social media platforms, and protests you may see on the street, has a surprisingly dark side. As you may know, PETA stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. But is this really what PETA is all about? To begin with some background, PETA was founded in 1980 by Alex Pacheco and Ingrid Newkirk. PETA's main focus is claimed to rescue animals in laboratories, in the food industry, in the clothing trade, and in the entertainment industry. But do PETA's actions really line up with this claim? In March 2017, PETA reported that they had killed 1,411 cats and dogs in 2019 at their headquarters, which is 72% of the cats and dogs in their facility. An analysis of PETA's kill rate in 2017 showed that their kill rate was 16 times higher than the average rate in Virginia, which was reported by the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. PETA's justification for these high euthanasia rates is that these killings are mercy killings, meaning they are doing these animals a favor by killing them. Another reason PETA claims to have high euthanasia rates is that they have limited space in their shelters. If an organization's main purpose is to keep these animals safe and protect them, why would they simply kill them because of limited space? Lastly, PETA believes that these animals are not to be kept as pets. They believe animals are meant to roam free and should not have to live in secluded spaces and obey to humans.
So what are your thoughts on PETA?
Well, I know what they do, but I don't know all in detail what they do. You know, I hear stories of things they do in the North Atlantic or whatever with whales and all that kind of stuff, and I suppose they're supposed to be a good organization, but I don't really know that much about them.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of facts of some of the things that PETA has done. So, and PETA reported to state regulators early this month, being 2014, that it killed 1,411 cats and dogs at its headquarters, and 72, which is 72% of the cats and dogs that they actually took in that group, which was roughly a little over 2,000 animals that they took in that group. And this rate is 16.3 times higher than other animal shelters, other animal care facilities in Virginia. So given that fact I just told you, what are your thoughts on PETA now?
Well, I want to know why. Was it because they got animals that were sick or injured and they weren't able to rehabilitate them, or they just didn't have enough room, or were they taken from hoarding situations? I guess I'd need more information.
So from what I've gathered so far, the main reason why is because they don't have enough room. But do you think that they could also send like the animals to another space or another animal hospital, animal shelters kind of thing that would have more space?
They would do that. If space was an issue, then it's definitely not a good thing, because there's plenty of rescue groups that will take animals, plenty of foster organizations and that kind of thing that would. So yeah, it's not a good statistic.
And say, do you know any animal shelters and or organizations that you would trust or recommend to people to care for stray animals or animals in need, or to adopt from?
Well, our two dogs we got from Paws for Life, and they get most of their animals from the Franklin County Animal Shelter, and they're a great group. They have fosters, and whenever they get the dogs from the pound, they get them into foster situations, and so I would definitely recommend them.
Hello, my name is Chris Mills.
I'm Laurel Gregory.
So Laurel, what do you primarily do concerning animals?
I do dachshund rescue for, which is the type of dog, and we save them from shelters, owner surrenders, which few rescues actually do owner surrenders, which is where if the owner can no longer take care of them, we take them in, or stuff like that.
Into your own home, or
into this whole our group, and we also do their vet bills and pay for any expenses they need.
Okay. So do you ever think that there's a need to euthanize an animal? And if so, like on what sort of condition would you consider it?
If they're in pain or a harm to this world, like if they're too harmful to be around other like humans or other animals, if they're so aggressive, and if they're in immense amount of pain where there's nothing they can do, but in situations where like, oh, we can't afford to get their teeth cleaned and it's harming them, we gotta put them to sleep, that's not okay.
So are you talking about more like terminally ill disease or like infectious disease?
In pain, and there's nothing that can do.
Okay. So, what are your thoughts on PETA? I'm sure you know what PETA is. What are your thoughts on that organization?
I think it's a good idea. PETA's the animals thing, place, right?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure. I think they have good ideas and everything, but they don't always go about it in the right way, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how to explain myself there.
Well, has your organization?
We haven't worked with them.
You've never worked with them?
No, because we're a private organization.
You're private.
I think so. We're like we haven't worked with them.
You've never worked with them?
No, because we're a private organization.
You're private.
I think so. We're like, I think we're private. We're government. I don't think we're government funded. No. We're volunteer funded.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Given that PETA has an euthanasia rate of 16.3 times higher than other animal shelters in the state of Virginia, what are your thoughts on PETA now after hearing that fact? And
I think that they should take into consideration, like, as well as the euthanization thing, if they are harm, and you have to go through like multiple different, you've gone through so many different trainers and stuff, but the way PETA's doing that, like just killing animals because there's not enough room, because that's usually what it is in shelters. They just don't have enough room for other animals. That's not good.
And I want to go back to how you've taken animals privately.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't take them in your home, correct? Sometimes. So those other times, are they going to other homes, or do you guys actually have like a
It's a fostering
shelter?
program.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah.
And how many animals would you say that you would normally take in, like, per year, say? And I don't want to give day by day, but like per year, how many?
It's gone up recently. I know that. We didn't take in a couple years ago. It wasn't that much that we took in, but then recently we're getting like 5 a week, and it's not good as well because we don't have enough room in homes to in like foster homes to take in all those animals.
And for the conditions that these animals are brought in, can you describe briefly how they're like coming in? Like, does it range, or are they almost always like suffering from a disease or an injury, or is there some instances where just no one can take care of them? Or
so they come in very different type things. Like, we had a dog named Lucy. She was taken great care of and all this stuff. I remember her very well because she was awesome. She ended up being my grandma's dog, but what happened was, and like other times, they're so abused, and like we had a dog that died in our care because he was so abused and not fed and malnourished and all this stuff. And we had dogs been chained to fences for months at a time. But normally they come in pretty good, just not as healthy as they could be because they weren't as well taken care of.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing the interview.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Euthanasia is a non-sterile solution that is made up of phenobarbital sodium and phenytoin sodium. In addition to this, rhodamine B, a bluish-red dye, is also added in order to help distinguish it from other drugs. Euthanasia causes cerebral death, which results in respiratory arrest and circulatory collapse. If an animal were to be put down by euthanasia, their remains would have to either be buried deep beneath the ground or be burnt to avoid other animals from eating and ingesting any remaining euthanasia. The process of distributing euthanasia is very simple. Each pet has the same dose, but the volume will differ based on the size of the pet. Veterinarians use phenobarbital, an injectable drug, and distribute it through a vein. This drug depresses the central nervous system, which starts in the cerebral cortex. This causes the pet to fall unconscious and later progress into anesthesia. An overdose of phenobarbital leads to the deep anesthesia following by stopping of breathing and cardiac arrest. Euthanasia is used because of its speed of action and very minimal discomfort to the animal. Most animals die within 10 seconds after being administered the drug. After death, some animals display common mechanical functions such as opening of eyes, urinating, and short gasps. These common functions may be very disconcerting for owners who have chosen to stand by their pet's side.
So the first question I have for you is, in what cases do you decide to euthanize an animal?
So obviously, if it meets a criteria where the quality of life is not good, so there's usually a set of criteria that veterinarians tend to follow. Are they eating? Are they drinking? Are they in pain? If they are in pain, can the pain be controlled? Are they still happy to do some of the things that they liked? And if those things seem to be not meeting certain criteria, then it's time to really take that into consideration. On occasion, I am asked to euthanize pets with such severe behavioral problems that it would not be appropriate to rehome them. That is probably another situation that I would do a euthanasia for, and I think it really can be a personal preference too. Some veterinarians will choose to do euthanasias under certain circumstances and not under other circumstances. There's something called a convenience euthanasia, and that's a pretty heated topic of conversation.
Okay. My next question for you is, does factors like body weight and body mass and the size of the animal affect the dosage you administer for the euthanasia?
Yes, the sedatives that I use are definitely on a milligram per kilogram basis, so that would be on body weight. And the euthanasia solution that I use is 1 ml, 1 milliliter per 10 pounds. The sedative can be given either IV into a vein or a muscle or just under the skin, but euthanasia solution more typically needs to be given in the vein. Occasionally it can be in very, very small, like pocket pets or wildlife. It can be put into the peritoneal cavity as an alternative, where it's harder to find a vein of size.
Okay. So how long does this process usually take from when the animal first checked in to after the whole procedure's done?
As far as technically, it really doesn't take long at all to administer the sedative. Then just 5 or 10 minutes for the sedative to work, and then they usually have passed by the time the euthanasia solution is finished going in. There is just a lot more, especially because all of the euthanasias that I do, the owners are present, and so there does tend to be more conversation and more being sure that the owners are comfortable, that the dog is comfortable, because I'm in an in-home situation, not in an exam room where the owners may not want to be present. So I allow an hour for the process, just being ready to kind of have enough time to do everything that we need to do and be sure that everyone's emotions are in check, and that the animal who is being euthanized, that everything is as comfortable as possible for them. You also have to plan on what to do with the body afterwards. So that's a choice that usually arrangements have been made in advance.
Okay. So what are like the typical reactions that an animal will give to being euthanized? Like, will some of the animals be like kind of more active, or will some be more kind of sedated? What are the typical reactions they give?
So the animal is going to be kind of all over the place depending on their particular situation upon my arrival. But then after the sedative is administered, which I use sedative for all of them, after the sedative is administered, there's only a few moments, maybe even a minute or two, where they will still be aware of what's going on around them. After the sedative is working, they are no longer aware of what's going on around them. So they are resting comfortably. Sometimes they're even snoring. Their eyes are typically open. But this would be a sedative where you would be able to do some very minor procedures on them. And then once they are sedated enough, I'll communicate that to the owners and ask if it's okay if we move forward. So by the time the euthanasia solution goes in, they are completely unconscious. Euthanasia solution going in is they would feel no more than just a tiny pinch of the skin as the shot is being goes through the skin. They would not feel the injection going in if they've had a sedative, for the most part.
Unfortunately, we were unable to receive PETA's first-hand account of this issue after several attempts to get in contact with one of their representatives. We want to emphasize that the point of this video was not to blame or slander PETA, but to simply bring attention to this issue. PETA's main goal is really to help animals in need and to avoid harming them in any way. However, they may not choose to use the most orthodox way in doing so. Animals are mistreated all over the world. Although you may want to help these animals, please make sure you are properly researching the background of the organizations you choose to support.